It is Sunday, the 27th of November. This is Raven Dana, and welcome to Walking Between the Worlds. This is class number 3 of 4 of the Gifts Beyond Fear. I know, the class should have been up on Wednesday. Had some gremlins hop into the machine again, but got them out, and I figured out how they're getting in, so I don't think we'll have this problem again. In any case, I am happy to be here with you today, and we're going to chat about the next level of information about fear. And I want to acknowledge that even though I've been talking about curiosity and changing the way you look at things and having a little more open-mindedness around things that might ordinarily frighten you, I also know that there are certainly people that have had experiences so frightening, so terrifying, that they come away from it with anxiety, with PTSD, with an inability to deal with or make sense of the experience because it's so strange and unexplainable. So I just want to be clear about two things. I'm certainly not saying if somebody walks up to you with a gun, you ought to be curious, right? I'm not saying that. And that's also clearly true of your experiences in the between worlds or with beings that you feel something threatening coming from, right? So I just want to be clear about that and to acknowledge that people do and have had experiences that are frightening and completely unexplainable. But we're going to take, again, even of some of those experiences, we can take a little bit of a different spin, a different take on them. Now, the two most common types of experiences where people report a lot of negativity from the visitors or the grays and all the conversations about implants and abductions and missing time and missing babies and all of those things. And the second, interestingly enough, the second most common stories I hear about that kind of stuff comes from the realm of the Fae or the fairies or the little people. Now, in many, many cultures around the world, there are stories in many different, how can I say this? I'm going to say it differently. The stories about the Fae or the little people, the fairies, including like gnomes and elves and what we might call elementals or nature spirits. There again, we have painted a picture of fairies, for example, like Tinkerbell, like little fluttery things with wings that are cute and they help the flowers open. Well, again, not that there aren't elemental spirits that I'm sure do that kind of thing. There are. However, when I'm talking about the Fae or the little people, I'm talking about the shining ones. I'm talking about a race of beings that live in the between, that live in like one step over place in the between, very similar to the frequency or the realm where we would consider the visitors to live. In fact, I'm not altogether sure that they are separate entities. They may even be versions of the same species or the same, and the only reason I'm saying that is because of the prevalence of people who have visitor experiences coming from cultures with Celtic backgrounds that are pretty big on keeping the idea of the shining ones, the little people, alive and in their storytelling, in their family line. So I'm not sure. I don't know how it works. I know that there's some kind of connection. I think there's some kind of connection. And some of the stories are similar. Changelings, babies being stolen, missing time, disappearing into the realm of fairy, into the side of a mountain, and into you in the fairy realm in the between. The time that passes is maybe a week. And then when you come back into the regular timeline, the other world, this world, you experience the revelation that perhaps 6 months or a year or 10 years have gone by. So there are experiences of very high strangeness that occur with both both the visitors, and by that I mean specifically in this conversation, the Greys, and with the Fae, or the fairies, or the Shining Ones, which again, we're not talking about, the little lawn ornaments of gnomes. We're talking about when they talk about red caps, for example, in some of the Fae traditions, they're talking about little creatures that they appear to be wearing red caps because their heads are dripping blood. So let's not get it confused with our garden gnome. Okay. And again, who knows? Maybe the one came from the other stories, or, again, we're not going to try to sort that out. But I do want to talk today about some ways to take a look at the experiences that we generally find particularly disturbing, and maybe get a little bit of an edge on having some understanding of a little ways in about what may or may not be going on, right? So, when you're feeling at risk or powerless to prevent contact or come away from an experience with anxiety and PTSD, again, one of the things we think about is how some of these experiences involve medical-like procedures, placing tracking implants, even having sex with humans, monitoring them, monitoring their offspring. Now, I want you to consider this odd idea. What would you think about going in to have a tooth pulled, a tooth extraction, or a colonoscopy, or some kind of invasive test in, say, a foreign country that you neither understood, you didn't understand what they were doing, you didn't understand why they were doing it, you weren't prepared for it, right? And also that the anesthetic, if an anesthetic was used, it either didn't do its job well, or it allowed you to retain your memory. You didn't get to forget the whole thing. It didn't work. That would be terrifying, right? Just think about it. If you've ever had any kind of surgery or any kind of even where they look down your throat to see if you've got ulcers, think about having any invasive procedure done without any understanding and preparation, no knowledge of what was about to be done or why it was being done. Absolutely terrifying. Would you leave that office with a feeling of anxiety? You bet you would. Okay. Now, I'm making this point because let's consider that in addition to these encounters, we also know of the same beings being involved in encounters where someone is sick and then they're well, where encounters with these beings lead to coming away with someone with cancer being cured, completely cured, with someone who can't get pregnant is now pregnant. And by the way, I have 2 daughters, and I was told that I had very low chance of ever getting pregnant, just saying. So when we're talking about encounters and medical procedures, and I'm going to invite you to imagine a clinic or a hospital or some kind of facility where you simply don't understand. Now, not that I'm saying that every one of these encounters is being done for benevolent reasons. I don't know that that's true, clearly, but I'm saying that in at least some of the cases, it's probably true. And we are just frightened because we don't understand what's happening or why, or the mechanism to remove our memory isn't working or hasn't worked. All right. So, for example, some of the other things that occur when we meet and experience the Greys are that when we cross into their realm, we can also end up in a place where we can meet with the dead and we can gain closure. Perhaps we see a dead family member. By the way, there is a movie on Netflix right now that I highly recommend that you watch. It is called Slumberland. Now, if you don't have Netflix, find a friend who does and go watch Slumberland. It is a really fascinating, well done story that shows the way the world between the worlds and the waking world is integrated. It's a tale about a young girl who lives in a lighthouse, and in her dreaming, in her dream time, solves some issues around her family and gets to meet and complete some business with her dad, who is lost at sea. So I'm encouraging you to see it for many reasons, because the crossovers that occur between the between world and the waking world are very clear and very well done, and there are a lot of them. So it will give you a flavor for some of the strange things that you experience or that you've heard other people experience. And you can have a nod to the reality of that these aren't just stories. Okay. So again, let's consider that in addition to the frightening encounters, that encounters with these beings have produced cures and given warnings for conditions that we have. I know people who have had experiences with visitors where they were told specifically that they had an ailment that they needed to go take care of, and they did. When I was 13 years old, I had 4 teeth removed. I was knocked out for it, of course. And I woke up with a, sodium pen, I'm sure they used. I was knocked out and I woke up with a mouthful of blood. I had no memory of sitting in the dentist chair. I had a panic attack. I thought I was going to die, right? I didn't know what was going on. And the assistant sitting next to me really had to talk me back into my body, right? Talk me out of my weird space. And, it was rough. And I knew what was happening, right? I knew what I was there for. But my body didn't react very well to the anesthetic, and it messed me up. I had nightmares for months. So I'm saying this to you specifically because if you've had a very frightening experience, I want you to go back and look at that experience with new eyes. Could it be that something was being done for me, not just being done to me, that I'm not aware of? Entertain that question. It's an important question, especially in light of the fact that there are so many stories and so much conjecture about how we humans even ended up being on the planet. So much talk about the possibility that we are seeded in some way, that perhaps these beings, whether we're talking about the Greys or some other beings, the visitors, I'm not broadening the scope, that the visitors may have something to do with who and what and how and why we are, and perhaps that there's a way of monitoring, checking up on, caretaking. We do that with each other. We have studies. We look for volunteers. We take people's blood. We scrape their skin cells, and we do all kinds of different things. Unfortunately, when we're dealing with between world beings, it's not often that we can have a grasp of what's going on. And so I just want to invite you that if you've had a terrifying experience, to see if there's a way to look at it through a little bit of a different lens and feel less like a victim and feel that there's a possibility simply there that there's something going on that you don't understand that's not necessarily a violation or an attack. Okay. All right. Now, there are also things that you can do. And not that every time these things are going to work, but there are times when they certainly have worked and worked very well. So I'm going to give you these suggestions. So if you step back and observe if you're having an experience, even one that's frightening, right? You come away with a little bit of a different feel for it. Instead of panicking which I know it's hard not to panic. And if you take a couple of breaths, if you get yourself to say, okay, let me observe what's happening here. Let me observe as clearly as I can who and what is standing around me and see if there's any possibility of communication. All right? You may not know what they did, what they're doing, or why they're doing it. But what you can do are these things. You can tell them, and tell them out loud, even if you don't think they'll understand, that you are afraid and that you'd like them to stop or to go away. Won't always work, but sometimes it does. You can also ask for an explanation of what they're doing and why they're doing it. You might get some ideas. You might get some images in your head, or you might have a sudden knowing or a sudden feeling about what it is. You can also call on your personal protectors, whoever they may be, whether they are spirit animals, guides, guardians, deceased loved ones, whoever you call on when you want some backup. You can call on those protectors to help you. You can also close your eyes in the experience and imagine yourself safely away and that the experience is over. In other words, you can, if all else fails, close your eyes and withdraw your energy from the situation. Another thing that you can do is decide if you can get a little grip on your fear. You can decide to brave up and to be as present as you can be in the experience, to actually witness your experience rather than be lost in the panic of it. I know that one's a tall order, but sometimes when you've had enough between world experiences, sometimes it's possible to be very frightened and still take a step back and observe really well. And I'm not just talking about, experiences with aliens or visitors or between world creatures or ghosts or, when people, there are stories of people who are abducted by other human beings, or their homes are broken into and they are tied up in their bedroom, and they get to this place of extraordinary calm. And even though they're frightened, they have this capacity open up to observe, to notice, and to wait for and to find the moment when they can get away or escape or break out. All right? So not that necessarily you're going to escape from a between world experience in the same way. However, it is possible that if you pull back and withdraw your energy, you might find yourself out of that zone and you might find yourself being returned to your particular reality experience. So I'm saying there are things that you can try. They won't always work, but some of them will work some of the time. So I'm going to give them to you again. To say out loud that you're afraid and that you would like them to stop or go away. To ask for an explanation of what is going on and why. To call on your helpers, your protectors for help. To close your eyes and withdraw your energy, to imagine yourself safely away. And to let yourself move through the panic or fear to that point of extra clarity where you're being very present in your experience to observe, so that when you do come back, when you are returned, you can write it down with clarity. You can write down what you saw and thought and felt and what they did and what they looked like and what things smelled like and what the sounds were in the room. So if you can bring that information back, sometimes that's extraordinarily helpful. Okay. So, moving on, let's take a few breaths on that, especially if you've had any of those kinds of experiences, so you can unhook from that, and we'll move on to the next part of the conversation. Fairies, little people, and the shining ones. So throughout history, there's stories of the fae, the little people. We're told that people disappear into fairy mounds. We're told to leave an offering for the fairies if they are thick with the land, right? If they're still living on the land we're living on, we want to be respectful of them. We want to acknowledge them as sentient beings that we share the earth with, even though they're not directly in the reality that we're in. They are in very, very short step away. In fact, some people say that the Fae used to live with and in communication with humans. And over time, things changed. And over time, they became more withdrawn and they shifted their bodies so that they could not be seen most of the time, only when they wanted to be seen. Okay. So encounters with the Fae can be both exhilarating or terrifying. Again, we're talking about another species of being. So, in the same way that we humans have our habits and our energy sources, we have our food that we eat, the Fae, as we're told in the stories, can be quite different. The Fae can eat or use our emotion as nourishment. Some of them and use our sexual energy. Some of them can use our fear. And so again, when you're talking about the Fae, you're talking about a race or a species that are not wired like human beings, but are familiar with interacting with human beings. So through these stories, we can also learn that they can come bearing gifts. They can do us some good. They can help us with the land. They can help us. And almost always, though, if they are offering help, there's a catch. There's something that they want us to do for them or something they want us to give them, which I imagine is only fair. And yet, again, this is something that you want to be careful of. You don't want to ever agree to something that you don't 100% know what you're agreeing to. Also, as the stories go, if you're in the realm of fairy, you don't want to eat anything or drink anything, because their version of food that can be given to humans can change us, can keep us there, can open a link between our system, our nervous system, and the fairy system, so we would see more of them, even if we don't want to. So again, these are all, I don't have firsthand experience in that particular area. I have never eaten or drank anything in fairy. I have had a couple of encounters, not many, but I have had a few encounters in dreams, in the dream space, where a dream would shift and stop, and I would be in the presence of what we would call the shining ones of my ancestors. Now, when I was a kid, my grandmother said that she saw, that she could hear the banshee, that she knew when there was a death coming. And she was able to predict deaths, even of strangers, even of people she didn't know, with remarkable clarity. Okay, so they're not just called, they're fae, fairy, fair folk, the good neighbors. They come, and they're in many different traditions: Celtic, Slavic, Germanic, English, and French. All right, to name a few, and then they have some other names in some other cultures. Now, and I also think there is some confusion between the lore of elementals, nature spirits, and what we call the Fae and the Shining Ones. But again, I'm not a scholar in that area, and I'm not going to pretend that I can sort it out, because I can't. It's not my wheel. It's not in my wheelhouse. I do, though, still find it fascinating that so many people who have encounters with the visitors also have encounters or connections, ancestral connections with the Fae. All right. So, my grandmother, like I said that she heard what she labeled a banshee, the harbinger of death, the one who warned her that a death was coming. Now, when I was 4 or 5 and I saw a visitor at the foot of my bed, and eventually asked my grandfather about it after the 3rd or 4th time it happened. The most interesting thing to me, thinking back at that time, was not only did not dismiss what I said, but his first response after he said, "Well, did you find it frightening? Were you scared?" And I said, "No, I didn't feel like it was threatening. I didn't feel like it would hurt me." Well, then the very first thing he said, "Well, maybe it was just a gnome or a fairy or some kind of, something like that." And just let it go and continued on in conversation. So again, very early on for me, the connection between the visitors and the Fae was made. It was there. Now, in the dream space, which is the conversation I want to come back to, I have been in their realm, moving through the dream space a couple of times in my life with very powerful experiences. So one experience I'll share with you. I was in the middle of what I'll call an ordinary dream. And then I saw to my left a stairway. I was walking down a sidewalk, and there was a stairway that went down, maybe about 8 or 9 steps. There was a brick wall. There was a door. I was intrigued. And as soon as I stepped on the steps, everything changed. I felt this energy rush through my body. The street that I was walking on in the dream became fog, and I walked down those stairs and into the door and found myself in a place not unlike a bar. I'd say it was kind of like a bar. And there was somebody behind the counter that was clearly not human, and it looked kind of human, but again was I would call that being one of the shining ones, beautiful beyond words, radiant, seductive, a shining one. Right? I don't know how else to say it to you, but that being did offer me something to drink, and at that time I didn't take it. But he laughed at me, and he pointed to a door and told me I was welcome to enter. And I turned to look, and there was no door. It was a brick wall. But at the wave of his hand, a door appeared. I went through that door and up a flight of stairs where there was a group of shining ones. And they waved me over and said we were just beginning. And they were not speaking English. They were speaking what I later discovered was some form of Old Gaelic. And they started to sing. And it was breathtakingly beautiful. And after they started singing it, we were all standing in a circle and I was standing among them. And they nodded for me to chime in, to sing, to harmonize with them. And I did. And in that singing, I had the most profound experience of understanding, of knowing how sound, the vibration of sound, became matter. How sound, how vibration, even vibration we cannot see, actually resonates and solidifies to become every molecule in our known three-dimensional world. It was incredible. Now, when I came out of that state, so anyway, when the song was over, when the song ended, they led me out onto a platform, and there was something coming, billowing and cloud-like coming our way, and they nudged me and said, you do it. They nudged me for me to quote unquote take care of it. And I sang this little snatch of music, and the big dark cloud vanished and dissipated. And then I found myself with a start falling. I was falling, and I landed in my bed and came out of that state. Now, I have thought about that. I've gone back to that many times in my mind, and while I have never been able to articulate what I understood so thoroughly in that moment about how sound becomes matter, I have since researched that phenomena a great deal, sound and matter and resonance and vibration and frequency, and I have found snippets of the things that I learned and was shown in that experience. So fascinating and beautiful is all I can say about it. But again, that was my powerful, wonderful experience. That's not to say that you could end up in that between world and have an experience that's frightening. So here are some little pieces of information, some tips. If you should, even in a meditation or out in the woods, which is possible, or by a source of a lot of natural energy, like a waterfall, or near, say, a Native American medicine cave. There are plenty of places on the planet where, again, the veil is thin and contact with the world behind the world is much easier to occur. So if you find yourself in the waking state or in the dream state or in a meditative state, if you find yourself in the presence of what you consider to be the Fae, here are some things to know. Never give them your full name. Just don't give them your full name. It's some kind of, we'll say it this way. If you speak your full name to them out loud, it is said that they therefore use your name to have some power over you. Now, again, I have not had that experience. I don't know how true it is, but I can tell you quite a number of Celtic sources say the same thing. So let's roll with it. Never speak your full name out loud. Okay. Don't eat or drink while in their realm. Not a good idea. If they do something for you, if they do you a kindness, don't say thank you. I know this is a strange rule of etiquette, but saying thank you for something done is almost, I won't say it's exactly like an insult, but it's you will owe them something if you say thank you. All right. And sometimes it's not a good thing. Don't bargain with them. Do not bargain with them. Don't offer them anything of yours personally, not a drop of blood, not a lock of hair. Don't offer them anything of you physically. And always be respectful. So if you have an encounter with the Fae and it's a pleasant encounter, one of the things you do to be respectful is to leave them an offering. And so that simply means that for them or for their creatures, the creatures of the earth, the animals and bugs and birds, you put something outside on the ground for them. It can be food. It can be something that you particularly like. If you like coffee, you can pour a little coffee on the ground because that has your energy and your emotion about it. It's something that you enjoy. You can also leave them a handful of rocks or shells or pebbles, something shiny. So anyway, these are things that you can do. So I'm just going to go over those tidbits again. Never give them your name out loud, your whole name. You give them your first name if you want. Don't eat or drink in their realm. If they do you a kindness, don't say thank you. If they want to bargain with you, don't do it. Don't offer them anything physically personal like hair or blood. And always, always be respectful. Acknowledge their presence. Acknowledge the role that they play, even though you may not understand it, because they are part of, they're in the realm where we also coexist, and so they are interfaced with the natural world through nature. They're interfaced with the world we inhabit through the processes of nature. So okay, so I hope that gave you a little more information, because again, beyond the fear, there are gifts. And it could be the gift of being cured of some illness. It could be the gift of suddenly knowing how something in the universe works. It could be the gift of knowing that some great good was going to come your way. It could be the gift of knowing that you might be about to have an accident but can avoid it. It could be the gift of recovering a memory that you have been looking for a long time. It could be a gift of remembering your dreams after a long dry spell. It could be a gift of recognizing that your daughter is a product of your encounter with the visitors. And there are plenty of other gifts to be had. I just want to leave that thought with you, that beyond the fear, there really are gifts. And I appreciate you for tuning in and being in this class with me today. We're going to do a meditation now and do a little journey into the realm of fairy. So get yourself comfortable. In fact, if you need a little something to drink like I do, this is my coffee. All right. Get comfortable and relax. Find yourself a position to sit supported, with your back supported, where you can relax for about 12 to 15 minutes. All right. Take a few very slow, very deep breaths. And as you breathe, allow your breath to relax. Allow your body to soften. Close your eyes and bring your attention into the rising up and the drifting down of your breath. Breathing in, you rise. Breathing out, you relax. You settle down. With every exhale, you relax a little more. Soften your jaw. Relax your shoulders. And any thoughts or worries, any tension falls down and away on the next exhale. You feel yourself settle down on the surface beneath you. relax. As you breathe, your body lets go and your mind becomes quiet. And in that still place, images begin to rise around you. And you find yourself walking in a garden. It's a large, manicured, beautiful garden. Some plants and flowers are in rows and neat, tidy boxes. Others are in areas that are growing wild and free. There are paths weaving through this garden. And the paths are also incredibly beautiful. They're laid in designs, spirals and circles with different colored stones. And you're as much intrigued by the paths as you are by the flowers and plants and benches and trees. And you come to a gate that leads to an even bigger, wilder part of this garden. And you stand there for a moment and remember the words, "May my gates and paths and doors be open, and my gates and paths and doors between the worlds, and may they be closed to any who would harm me or those I love." And as you remember those words, that gate slowly creaks open. And you step through. And when you step through to the larger part of the garden, everything takes on a crystal clarity. The colors are more vivid. The scents are more vital. You can smell the grass. You can smell the flowers and the earth itself. You walk up to the closest tree and realize that you can smell the bark. And above you, a bird starts trilling and singing. And you catch little glimpses out of the corners of your eye. A fox scurries by. A rabbit makes its way across the path quickly. A squirrel scurries up a tree and disappears. And you keep walking, following the curve of the path. In this wilder space, the trees hang low over the path. There are all kinds of flowering, blooming plants and bushes. And to the left, you see a part of the garden with extraordinary plants, briars, prickles, roses, all sharp angles and sharp thorns, beautiful and stark. And you take a turn on the path, choosing the right path over the left. And it takes you to a lush and grassy space, in the center of which is a fairy ring, a ring of mushrooms. And you step off that path and walk all the way around that ring of mushrooms, looking closely at the different ways the mushrooms are growing, the colors, the way some of them seem to be leaning on each other. You can feel the way they're communicating above and below the ground. And you take a breath and step into that ring. And as you do, you feel a tingle wash across your body. And you see a form begin to materialize in front of you. And even though you don't have words for it, you know that it's some kind of fairy, between worlds being. It's beautiful, and it radiates light. And you just notice it as it notices you. It has a twinkle in its eye, as if it's a bit amused by your presence. And you have the clear impression that it's letting you know that you are standing in the doorway to its home or its realm. And it wants to know if you're sure that you'd like to continue. And you think for this time you'll just stand in the doorway. But you look each other over and you begin to relax, even though you can feel this wild energy coming from this being. And you have a sense, a true sense of your own wildness, not in any negative way, but the deep, true animal nature that you share with other animals. Your instincts, your deeper capacity to notice, to smell, to see, to hear that which you normally ignore. And this being nods at you. And reaches into the folds of the fabric-like material that surrounds them and brings out a hand, holding their palm flat and their palm up to the level of their eyes. You look into their hand and see something shimmery and shining, and they blow. They blow a substance that you immediately think of as fairy dust, shining and glittering in the light. And you close your eyes as it comes your way and it engulfs you in a cloud. And when you open your eyes, you're back outside the garden gate. And your senses are heightened, and you feel warm and at ease and connected to nature in a brand new way. And you can understand how this being can be both exhilarating and terrifying. And this experience for today is a good one. And you walk back a little ways, finding a bench that you noticed when you were walking in, and you have a seat, just relishing the sensations rolling through your body, the heightened awareness, the sense of deep ease. And you close your eyes and bring your attention back to your breath. Very slowly you begin to breathe your way back into your body, into the moment, into the room in which you rest, calling yourself back, finding the sensation of clothing against your skin, noticing the feeling of gravity as it pulls you gently towards the earth. You breathe your way all the way back, bringing back with you that sense of connection, of your wildness, of the beauty of being an embodied animal among others in nature and the world. You return fully to the moment and open your eyes. Thank you for journeying with me today. I hope you've had a good adventure. You can feel free to use this meditation to go back and have different experiences there if you wish, or to go sit out in nature somewhere, in some wild place, and invite contact if you so wish. You might also check in with your family. If you come from a background that has stories about the Fae, that might be a very interesting thing for you to do to connect with. All right, until next time. And we have our last class coming up next. And I hope that you've enjoyed this class. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. And if you need to reach me, ravendana.com. It's very easy to find me. And until next time, perhaps I'll see you walking between the worlds. Have a lovely Sunday afternoon. Bye now. Okay.